Hey everyone, and welcome. So, today I want to talk about a little bit if the world, our world, is ending. Or at least I want to try and have a conversation, a reflection on this topic, and then try to reach a conclusion if our world is ending. Now, before we begin, there are three things that I want to say really quickly. So the first thing is that I am not a native English speaker. English is not my first language. So if I make any mistakes or if my English is imperfect, then I do apologize. I pretty much learn English all by myself. So if I make any mistakes, then I do apologize. And the second thing that I want to say is that everything that I'm going to say here in this video, these are my own ideas, my own thoughts, my own reflections. So you should never feel pressure, or you should never feel like you need to agree with anything that I'm saying here. You always have your own mind, your own intellect, and you can always reach your own conclusions to whatever you wish. And the third thing that I want to say is that I made a video prior to this one where I was trying to predict the future by analyzing the past. And in this video, I'm going to basically pick up from where I left off in the other video. So if you haven't watched it, or if by chance you're watching this video without knowing about this other one that I just said, then I would suggest or invite you to watch that video as well, so you can have a little bit of a better understanding of what I am talking about here. Now, with that out all of the way, shall we get started? So, just as I did in the last video, in the prior video that I just told you about, in this one, I'm gonna try to present a little bit of an overview of the world as it is today. And after I give you this overview, I will then try to reach a conclusion, right, to the topic at hand, if the world is truly ending or not. But just as I did in the last video, or what I have in mind to do in this one, I am not going to present too many details of the world, specific nations, specific policies, things like that. And this is something that I did in the last video too. I didn't necessarily concern myself too much with the details, specific points in time, specific references, things like that. And the reason why I didn't do it, and the reason why I don't want to do it in this video as well, is because if you think too much about the details, or you get too in-depth into the details themselves, then there's always the chance that you might lose yourself in those details, and then you wouldn't necessarily see the bigger picture, right? Not that the details aren't important, of course they are tremendously important, but in this video I want to bring more of an overview and perhaps in another video, in another opportunity, and especially if anyone is willing to share their thoughts and details on these matters too, then maybe on the future we shall delve more in depth into those details. But as I said, just like in the last video, I will try to focus more into presenting an overview of the world as it is today, without worrying too much or without focusing too much on the details. So the way I see the world today, whenever I think about it, to me the world itself, perhaps if you wouldn't be able to classify them exactly as what I'm about to say to you, then perhaps what I'll say will give us a better understanding more or less on how the world works, even if it doesn't fit perfectly into the narrative or description that I'm about to tell you. But whenever I think about the world, and whenever I think about the systems that compose the world, I always think that we more or less have the same formula or equation or narrative or a system that is presented to the world and to all of us. And what I'm talking about? Basically, I see the world divided into what is known as left, right, and center. Now, left, whenever you think about the concepts that are presented in the left, you are then thinking about socialism and perhaps in more extreme cases, communism. And whenever you think about the concepts that surrounds the right sphere or the right positioning of the world, then you would get capitalism and all that capitalism entails. And whenever you think about the center to me would be both visions at the same time, or at least elements of both visions, both the left and the right, or socialism, or more extreme cases, communism and capitalism, gathering elements of those two directions and uniting them into either one, or trying to present something that has both elements into their own system. Now, I won't tell you which system I do believe is better for any nation or any particular nation, and even the world itself. Why I won't do that? Because I don't think things are so very simple in order to just pick and choose one or whatever you like. And maybe as I talk more about this, it will become a little bit clearer what I think. So let's talk a little bit about what the left is first, before I talk a little bit more about the right. So as I said, whenever I think about the left, I am inevitably thinking about socialism, and in more extreme cases, as I said, communism. Now, I do know that both socialism and communism, they have a whole lot of different scholars and ideas and point of views, and which one is the better presented for the world or the modern world that we have today, and which one would be better. From everything that I've studied, I see that there isn't necessarily a consensus, a united idea on which of those examples or philosophies regarding the left or socialism, or more extreme cases communism, in which is better for the world. But from my general studies, or for everything that I've been studying about the left and socialism and communism, one of the things that I think about presents themselves the most, perhaps in all of those different philosophies regarding the left or socialism or communism, but one of the things that I see presented the most is the goals themselves, like the end goals that socialism or communism would bring perhaps to the world itself, should the world adhere or follow in that direction. So, as I understand, socialism, or in more extreme cases, communism, basically the end goals or what they will try to achieve would be a sense of communities or greater communities, growing into creating very, very enormous or greater communities. And how would they work exactly? How would these communities work? Now, as I study it, basically in socialism and in more extreme cases communism, and in this case I would be referring more to communism itself, these communities would basically work everything by themselves. What do I mean by that? You basically be by the community, for the community. So you could think of it as a, for instance, let's think of a smaller community first. So in a smaller community, you would basically have representatives of that community. Then you could think of it as a council of that community. They would get together and they would analyze the problems that the community had, and then they will all work together into fixing those problems. Now, these problems and these tasks, they would all be done by the community themselves, and then they would be presented to the community, so the representative, the council would discuss, and then they would present it to everyone else, and if everyone else agreed, then there you go. Everyone would work towards that goal, or the goals that were presented for everyone. And those tasks, those work, or those goals that the community or their small community would do, it would basically be everything, right? So if they had problems with crops, if they had problems with water supply, if they had problems with electricity, or any other problems that the community might have, communication, you name it, any problems that the community might have, then they would get together, they would analyze it, they would debate over it, and then once they figure out the best way to do it, then they would do it. You would be by the community, for the community, always making the decisions united and going from there. This is generally the senses that I get whenever I think about socialism, or more especially communism, right? Now, as I said, this example was just a small community, right? But whenever you think about communities that were larger and larger, it was pretty much the same thing. It would be a sense of communities on top of communities on top of communities, creating greater communities, and they would all communicate with one another the problems that they all had, and that they will all work together towards fixing those problems. So basically, this is the sense of the idea that I get whenever I think about socialism and communism. And if I'm not making enough justice here or not presenting enough details to what socialism and communism is, then please by all means write it down on the comments. As I said, there are many different types of studies and scholars and ideas towards communism and socialism, right? But one of the things that I always think about whenever I'm thinking about the left or socialism or communism, and again, if I'm not doing enough justice here, then please by all means write it down in the comments. But whenever I think about socialism and communism, even though there are so many different perspectives, the way I see it or the way I perceive it is always generally about people. About people, about society, about civilization, about human beings, and the interaction that they have with one another, and essentially the sense of communities, right? The sense of trying to create something good for everyone in those communities and have the communities themselves work to all of their problems, all that they need to do together. Now, let me present a little bit too about capitalism. So present a little bit more or some about the other side, right? The side on the right, capitalism itself. And if by chance, eventually more as we proceed, I can perhaps add more to the left or socialism or communism themselves. But let us think a little bit about the right now, the other direction, the capitalism. So to me, whenever I think about capitalism, and I know there's several different studies and scholars too, but whenever I think about capitalism, the first thought or idea that comes to my mind is the idea of free market. Free market, free commerce, free transactions all around, right? It's the idea of supply and demand. So if you have a capitalist system, then all of those problems that people might have different than socialism, in capitalism, these problems would be solved or they would be turned into either products or services. So if someone has a need or if people have a need for clothing, then all of a sudden you're gonna have a whole lot of stores and services that provide clothing. So you can buy clothing, you can rent clothing, you can do all these different things with surrounding clothing under the capitalism system, right? And as you have so many different services, as you have so many different products under capitalism, then may the best one win, right? So in an environment where so many options are available under the capitalism system, then inevitably people would choose some over the others. So you would have products that would have great marks, very fashion, very extravagant, very luxurious, and you would have other products too that are more common or perhaps more associated with cost benefit, so for lower classes, right? And this is all under the capitalism system. It would basically be a system, as I said, with a lot of freedom towards commerce and market and transactions and clients and those owners of products or services that would provide their services or their products to the clients, right? And as you create this capitalism system, basically what you have, or what happens, is that you have those that are very, very successful and those that are not. You have business that become very great and business that go under. And if you think about on the scales getting higher and higher and higher, then basically you would get even nations that would provide great services and great products and therefore become great themselves. But you would also have the opposite. You would have nations that would not be able to compete with these great nations, with these great products and these great services. So these other nations, they would not be able to become great themselves. So this is always the case or the idea for capitalism. It not only involves free commerce and free market and free transactions, but it also involves a lot of money and a lot of power that comes from earning more and more money, essentially being very, very different or the opposite from socialism or communism, right? Because in capitalism, basically all that matters is money. Money is always on top of things when it comes to capitalism. It goes further than even the products or the services themselves. The money is what reigns in capitalism. But it's more than that, really. If you think about these systems, this socialism and communism, and now also with capitalism, if you think them applied into the world themselves, then what do you get exactly? Now, this isn't me saying what's best for the world or which system should you not only create or use, but whenever I think about capitalism, and most especially capitalism, this is something that also happened in socialism and communism, what I'm about to say, but more in capitalism as I see it. Now, capitalism, when you apply it into the world, not only it creates the sense, as I said, of free market, free commerce, free transactions, may the best one wins, money reigns, and all of that, it also creates this sense of great urgency. What I mean by that? I mean better services, better products, become better, more and more and more, faster and faster. I want it more, I want it for yesterday. You know, can you understand more or less what I'm saying? Basically, capitalism creates this sense of not only urgency, but also of greater impact into the world and society itself. Basically, it created this sense of wanting more, wanting to consume more, wanting the product or the service to be better. And as this idea or this concept applies to humanity and human beings into the world, this sense of urgency, this sense of consumption, this sense of needing more and more and more and faster and faster and faster and better and better and better, this also makes, in my opinion, it makes society evolve faster. What do I mean by that? I mean that the services that the people have available at that time, they are in constant evolution. So communications, transportations, everything is in constant evolution because people want more, people want faster, people want it to be better too. So this this need that the society has on capitalism or on capitalistic systems, it basically forces humanity and human beings to produce more and to become better and faster at much higher speed. It forces humanity to really go above and beyond in their capacities, in their capabilities. So inevitably what you have, and as I said, this also happened in socialism and communism, but whenever I think about both scenarios, left and right, capitalism is usually what is forcing people to go further, to go ahead at much higher speed, or in a hurry for things to become better. And as I said, this also happened with socialism and communism. If you want an example, maybe you could think about the events that happened during the Cold War. Then basically you would have the two sides, capitalism and socialism, competing, right? But to me, I really think that capitalism is usually what pushes people to go faster, to become better, and to have more at a much faster speed than before. And as I said, as society evolves and as the need for evolution also forces people to evolve faster, then the technology that you have available on the world, it also evolves faster. It also goes at a much higher speed than before. And to me, whenever I think about that, and especially in capitalism, I don't see the same concept in socialism or in communism. Not that communism and socialism wouldn't advance society, of course they would, but to me, whenever I think about communism and socialism, but most especially communism, it's always a sense of community, right? Of or great communities. So it's always the sense of by the community for the community, or by the people for the people. So if people have, in socialism, if people have access to food, water, medication, services that work and things like that, if things are good, right, in this community, then all of this community themselves, they wouldn't necessarily be in a hurry or in a tremendous hurry to evolve, to make society evolve and go towards the next step of evolution. No doubt in my mind that this would inevitably happen, but whenever I think about these two concepts, being socialism and more especially communism, and then compared to capitalism, to me it's undeniable that capitalism is the one that is forcing people to go at a much faster speed towards the next step of evolution. Now, as I said, this also impacts on technology and science and how it applies onto the world, the capitalism system. Now, the technologies, as they evolve, so to the services and the products, and also the way that these services and products are made, they also evolve. So for example, if you have a factory, right? Let's say that you have a factory that produces clothing or shoes. In the past, and perhaps not even the distant past, but the recent past, this factory would be able to produce their products by employing people, right? And as they employed people, they would assign their tasks, and then they would eventually, or perhaps depending on how fast the company or the industry or the factory wished, they would produce those shoes and they would produce those clothing, right? But as society advanced, so did the technology and science themselves. And then at a certain point, and we see this happening more and more nowadays, these factories that once employed a lot of people, all of a sudden they don't need to employ a lot of people anymore, because most of the factory is made with machines, right? But ironically enough, I remember hearing this a lot too some years back. People would always say, oh, but even if you have a factory that has advanced machinery to produce the product, you still need the presence of human beings, right? You always need the presence of human beings to operate those machines. So even if a factory or an industry isn't hiring as many people as they did before to do the work to create those products, right? In this example I said clothing and shoes. Even if the factory or the industry isn't hiring as much anymore, there will always be the need for people to operate those machines, to operate those machinery. So all that people need to do, or all that workers need to do, is to study more, right? To have higher education, or to specialize themselves into operating those machinery. This is a concept that existed not too long ago. And what I mean not too long ago, I literally mean perhaps a decade ago, or maybe even not a decade, maybe even just a few years ago. But lo and behold, technology constantly evolves, science is constantly evolved under this capitalism system that has the need to create these services as fast as possible, these products as fast as possible. So the sense of urgency, the sense of need, the sense of more and more and more and faster and faster and faster and better and better and better, this pushes society, this pushes people, this pushes human race as a whole to become better and faster, right? So in capitalism, there is no holding back. In capitalism, there is no halting back. In capitalism, there is no slowing down. You never have the sense of slowing down in capitalism, and especially when capitalism becomes to an extreme point. It's always faster and faster and faster and more and more and more and better and better and better. It's always the sense of great urgency, and it's always the sense of going as further as you can, as fast as possible, because you see that the more you do that, the more you provide this product, the more you provide these services, the more you have to offer upon the world that is capitalist or uses a capitalism system. The more you do that, the more you have a company that or service that provides these products or services, and the more you provide them, the better they are, and the faster they are, the more reliable they are. Then all of a sudden, you yourself or your company or your business that is providing those services, it increases the chances of success. And when I mean success, I mean money. Not only you become greater and more powerful and have a greater presence into the world itself, but it also reflects on money. Money is, in my opinion, is what reigns in capitalism society. So the more you provide, the better you provide, the faster you provide, then the higher the chances you of becoming successful in obtaining success, and also the chances increases of you earning more money, of you being able to earn more money. So that's how it goes with capitalism. Then all of a sudden, these factories, right? Going back to the example that I just said, these factories that once employed a lot of people to create these products, right? The clothing and the shoes. After a while, the factories became equipped with a lot of machines, with machineries that did most of the work. But then you say, oh, but you always have the need for humans to operate those machines, right? Wrong, because as I said, technology evolves at a much higher speed, and their services evolve at a much higher speed than in socialism and communism. In the sense of creating a community so that the people could work for themselves, by the people, for the people, and all of that. All of a sudden, in capitalism systems, all that matters is success and money. So this company, as I said, this industry in this factory that would produce this clothing and the shoes and would hire people to do so, then they get replaced with heavy machinery that do most of the work. And then later on, everyone can be replaced with artificial intelligence, with AI. You see, AI, many people can try to come to a conclusion or try to study it and see if it is more of a product towards the left or the right, if it is a product towards capitalism and socialism. But to me, as I said, I think this scenario would very likely be presented upon people no matter which system you chose, because people are still people, humans are still humans, and the humans have their own minds and their own intellects and are able to create great things, right? So I think the AI and artificial intelligence would probably appear no matter which side you picked. But going back towards the example of the factory and that produces clothing and shoes, especially in a capitalism system, then all of a sudden this factory that would once employ a lot of people to produce those products, all of a sudden there is no need for anyone else, because the industry and the factory evolved to such a high degree that it can produce its own product, everything that the industry and the factory needs, without the presence of perhaps even a single human being. The machines do it all, and AI, artificial intelligence, coordinates the productions, right? It makes it so that the factory can produce all of those clothing, all of those shoes, without the presence of human beings. Now, a lot of people would look at this, will look at the scenario that I just described to you, and they will instantly classify capitalism as evil, right? Because capitalism wouldn't even provide people with work or jobs anymore. And this is something that is happening nowadays, right? You have many countries, great countries that are essentially very capitalist or under the capitalism systems. They are very capitalist themselves. You have a lot of those countries where people don't have jobs and can't get jobs because technology is constantly evolving. And now there's no longer a need for people to go and do these jobs anymore, because the machines and artificial intelligence are operating, are doing those tasks, are doing those jobs. So then why would a company need to hire a human being and pay a salary to a human being if a machine will do that task for free? So then a lot of people will look at this and they'll think that capitalism is evil, because basically what will become of all of these people that can't get a job anymore, or even if they can get a job, since unemployment is so large, and since unemployment becomes so great as technology advances, the salaries that people receive, right, from those jobs that they're able to get, their wages, right, their wages will either be stagnant or they'll become lower and lower and lower. Why? Because you have a lot of people that are unemployed and they are desperate for work, for jobs, to survive, right? To have a little bit of money to be able to survive. And as technology improves, as society improves, and as the capitalist system goes full steam ahead, non-stop, then this situation that I just described to you all of a sudden doesn't become better, or all of a sudden can't be stopped, all of a sudden there is no way out to make it better and to quickly make it better. So essentially what you're gonna have is a lot of people unemployed and a lot of people in desperate need for work and in desperate need for money to survive. So then anyone that would look to a scenario like this would of course perhaps come to a conclusion and think that capitalism is evil, because it made a scenario where people are no longer even needed in this capitalist system, right? So of course many people would think that capitalism is evil. But you see, it's as I said, even if you had chosen communism and socialism and nothing but communism and socialism, or in more severe cases just communism, even if you had chose that, you are still dealing with human beings, right? And human beings have their own mind and their own intellect, and many can be tremendously brilliant, right? So to me, eventually a scenario like this would inevitably happen no matter which side you choose, because it is always going towards the future, it's always advancing technology, it's always advancing science. So to me, I think that this scenario, especially with artificial intelligence now, I think this is a scenario that would happen either way. The question is when, right? When would it have happened? And depending on the system that you chose, left, right, or center, then the question is when would it have happened? But it's not a matter of if would it happen, but when would it have happened? And to me, it just so happens that it happened on a capitalistic or a world that is more based onto capitalism, or even if it's not entirely based on capitalism, that is at the very least influenced by capitalism. So then the question is, what comes next, right? Because what's done is done, and I don't see any way of it stopping or slowing down anytime soon, because as I said, there is no stopping capitalism. It's always full speed, full steam ahead. So then the question is, what will happen next, right? And here's where the title of the video comes in place once again, right? We're talking about if, or we're asking if our world is truly ending or not. Now to me, whenever I think about this topic and whenever I think about the world, to me, right now, to the point that we are right now, to me it doesn't matter anymore if it is left, right, or center. And I'll explain what I mean by that. To me, basically, society has come a long way, and it has done so in a very small period of time. For example, let me give you a brief example of what I mean, and maybe by giving this example would be a little bit easier to understand what I'm talking about. So I remember back when I was a kid and I was at school, and this topic, this concept appeared all the way, or it continued all the way even to college and even beyond college. But I remember back when I was a kid and I was at school, and the teachers, many teachers and scholars, I remember this clearly. They would tell us often that society and civilization and technology and science and the systems that we live and the systems that are applied upon the world, or the systems that the world is composed of. The teachers and the scholars, they would often tell us that humanity and civilization has come such a long way in such a fast rate, at such a high speed, or constantly evolving, that the teachers will tell us that they themselves no longer had any hope of trying to understand everything, like trying to understand the systems of the world, right, and the systems of how the world works, or how things in the world are. And they will often tell us that we the children, we the next generation at the time, that we were the hope basically of the world, that the children were the hope of the world. Why is that? Because they believe that, and the teachers and the scholars would say this, they believe that only those that were born in those constant, in an environment of constant evolution, right? In an environment where things constantly evolve, only those that were born in it, the children that were born in it, only those children could ever hope to understand it, because it had become too complicated for the elders at the time, or perhaps even not the elders, or basically the adults, right, at the time, to understand it. It was too much, it was too complicated, and they told us that they couldn't do it, no matter how hard they tried, that they couldn't understand it. So the hope was for the next generation to truly understand it, to truly understand what's going on, and then to lead or to guide humanity towards the next step of evolution, because the previous generation, they themselves would say to us as children at school that they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it anymore, they couldn't hope to do it, because they themselves did not understand basically all the systems of what was going on. So then the only hope left, or the only hope that they had, as they told us, the teachers and the scholars told us, was for the next generation, was for the children that were born in it to understand it, and then guide everyone else towards the next step of evolution. However, now things have become so very, very advanced and so very, very fast that really soon, or at least this is what many are starting to understand and starting to believe. Many believe that very soon there won't be anyone left here on this world, any human left on this world that will be able to understand it. No matter how old you are, no matter your age, no matter your intellect, no matter your mind, it won't matter, because very soon things will become so very advanced, so very highly advanced, that no one will be able to understand it. And not only they won't be able to understand it, they will also not be able to control it. Why? Because it will be controlled by machines. It will be controlled by artificial intelligence. And it's not just like that example that I told you of a factory that produces clothing or shoes. It's more than that. It's way more than that. It's everything. Absolutely everything. All of the systems of the world. Communications, technology, economies, currencies, finances, banks, everything. Literally everything. In a very, very small period of time, because it's already happening now, very soon it will all be controlled or um, or guided or heavily influenced by machines, by machinery. So to me, pretty soon this is the scenario that we have. Pretty soon this is the scenario that it's going to happen. Pretty soon the machines and artificial intelligence will control everything, right? Absolutely everything. And then once again comes the question, right? What will happen next? Is this the end of the world? Is this where the world ends? Is the world going to end soon? And why do people think that? Why do people think that way? Why do people think that the world is ending? And to me, the answer is pretty obvious. You see, the more the world advances and the more it advances under capitalism, and by now you could choose whatever system you like. For instance, you could choose socialism or communism, but it still wouldn't matter because it's a sense of what it's done is done, right? Or the damage has already been done. Not to the sense of capitalism itself is evil or capitalism itself is a damage towards the world or to society. Because as I said, I believe this is something that would have happened no matter which side you picked. I believe this is something that would have happened eventually. Because as I said, society keeps evolving. So now here comes the question, right? What will happen next? And why do so many people think that the world itself is ending? And if you look at the world today, what would you see? You see a lot of misery, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of wars, a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty towards the future. And even those that have work, that have jobs, their wages are stagnant or their wages are low, so many of them can't even afford basic living. They need a second job or even a third job just to be able to afford basic necessities. And it keeps getting worse and worse and worse at a faster and faster rate. And since things only get worse, since we only see things getting worse all the time, then of course all of a sudden you start to see the systems of the world, and especially of capitalism itself, then you will start to conclude, or you'll become very, very easy to conclude that capitalism is evil, that capitalism is the origin and source of all evil. And as I said, I don't agree with that concept, because it may have happened regardless of where you choose, left, right, or center. But since things are so very, very bad, and things are so, it's only going to get worse, then it's only obvious to lose hope for the future. It's only an obvious or natural conclusion to think that the world is ending, that everything is ending, and then there is no hope, right? And I won't lie to you, things don't really look all that great. Things aren't necessarily all that great. And under capitalism, civilization and society and the world, you always have the sense of great business, great corporations, and the owners of these great business and corporations that have earned a lot of money. And with that money comes a lot of power and comes a lot of influence. Money rules over a capitalism society. Money rules over a capitalism world. So the more money you have, the more powerful you become, and the more influence over the world you also have. And if you keep growing, if you keep achieving more and more and more, and obtaining more and more money, then the more powerful you can become, the more influence you can have, to the point that you might even become untouchable. Untouchable as in you can do whatever you want, you can do whatever you like, and no one will ever be able to touch you or do anything to you. Basically, you become above the law and beyond, right? So capitalism and capitalism world and capitalism society clearly, to me, has created a sense of overlord or overlords, as in more than one, that clearly control the world, right? And many people think that if it had been the other way around, if it had been socialism and communism all the way, then this scenario could have been prevented, that the scenario of overlords controlling the world could have been prevented. But I myself, I'm not so sure of that. I don't think the world is that simple. It has never been that simple. And I think that these overlords might have existed no matter which side people picked. And to me, even if it had been socialism or communism all the way, perhaps eventually you'd pretty much have the same problems with the same overlords, with the only difference is the way that it got to be that way. The way that it basically, it's like, you could think of it as a different path. For instance, let's say that you were once walking towards only one direction, and then the path diverges into two different paths. But then these two different paths, they all lead towards the same end. Like the paths, in the end, they merge together. At the end, the paths, they all become this diverged path. They all become one, or they become one once again at the end. So to me, that's the way that I think. I don't think that society is so very simple that simply by choosing one method or one side, no matter which one it is, left, right, or center, that all of a sudden it would magically just work out. Work out in the sense that it would be good for everyone and everything, right? Now, I could go on talking about this for a very, very long time, and we are already approaching an hour here of me talking about this, and I was already expecting this to happen, to be honest, because this is a topic that it's a very, to me at least, it's a topic that is very intricate and very elaborate, and that it can take a long time for you to have a reasoning over it. So what I think I'm gonna do here, I think I'm going to divide this video into two, like part 1 and part 2, for us to try and come to the conclusion or come towards the idea or the concept if the world is truly ending or not, or what's going to happen in the future. But for now, I think this is where I'm going to end. Even though I haven't reached a direct answer to the topic at hand, if the world is truly ending or not, in this video, I still think I was able to, at the very least in my mind, I think I was able to present a bit of an overview of the world and how the world is today and where things might be heading towards the future or the very near future of what might happen in the very near future. And then the question becomes, of course, what will happen to everyone, to society and civilization and the world once we get there, once we get to that point. But for now, this is where I'm going to end, and hopefully on the next video, on part 2, I'll be able to dwell more about this topic, and I'll be able to perhaps reach a more definite or definitive answer to the world in itself, and if it is truly ending or not. But for now, this is where I'm going to stop the video. But thank you very much for watching. Truly, thank you. And if you enjoyed it, if you liked it, then I thank you again. And if you watch all the way to the end, then I'm truly thankful. And please, by all means, if you want to add something more to the video, or you have your own thoughts, your own conclusions, please, by all means, write it down on the comments, and I'll be very happy to read them all. But for now, this is where I am. So hopefully we will soon see each other again very, very soon. Thank you again. Goodbye.